The emergency room lights were blinding as I stumbled through the double doors carrying my 7-year-old daughter in my arms. Maya's small body was burning hot against my chest, her tears soaking into my blouse as she whimpered in pain. The Sunday night ER was crowded, but the second the triage nurse saw my daughter's pale face and the way she clutched her stomach, she rushed us to the front without hesitation. Dr. Whitmore, Examination Room 1. Now the nurse barked, her tone cutting through the chaos. My heart hammered in my chest as I followed each step heavier with dread. I tried to whisper soothing words to Maya, but she only whimpered, "It hurts, Mommy, it hurts so bad." I felt powerless holding her tiny fingers in mine, knowing something was deeply wrong. Dr. Angela Whitmore entered the room briskly, her white coat flowing behind her. She looked to be in her 40s, calm but with an edge of urgency in her movements. "I'm Dr. Whitmore," she said gently, crouching beside Maya's bed. "Sweetheart, can you tell me where it hurts?" Maya pointed to her lower abdomen, wincing as she did. Dr. Whitmore's eyes darkened the kind of look doctors give when they see more than they want to reveal. She pressed lightly on Maya's stomach, and Maya cried out. My stomach turned cold. "How long has she been in pain?" the doctor asked, glancing at me quickly. "Since last night," I stammered, my voice shaking. "She just came back from a weekend with her father. I thought she was tired, but today the pain got worse. And then the fever started." Dr. Whitmore nodded, scribbling something onto the chart. The nurse, a kind man with warm brown eyes named Miguel, moved to help position Maya comfortably. He spoke softly, trying to distract her with stories while the doctor continued her exam. For a moment, I thought it was working until Maya suddenly whispered words that froze the blood in my veins. "Daddy's friends gave me something yucky," she murmured. My throat constricted. I leaned closer, praying I'd misheard. "What did you say, baby?" I whispered. Maya blinked drowsily, her lips trembling. "They gave me a drink, said it would make me quiet." Dr. Whitmore's head snapped toward me, her calm demeanor faltering just slightly. For a split second, I saw her jaw tighten, the mask of professionalism cracking to reveal shock and anger. She turned back to Maya, her voice soft but urgent. "Sweetheart, can you tell me more about the drink?" "But—" Maya shook her head weakly, turning away and curling into herself. Her small frame trembled, and I wanted to scoop her up and run away to shield her from whatever nightmare she had endured. My chest burned with fear and fury. What had Derek done? What kind of people had he taken her to? I thought of the custody hearings, of the judge dismissing my concerns about Derek's temper, about his reckless friends. I thought of the way he smirked at me in the courtroom, whispering under his breath, "You'll regret trying to keep her from me." And now here we were, my little girl, broken and fevered on a hospital bed. Dr. Whitmore placed a steady hand on my arm, but her own hand trembled slightly. "Mrs. Carter, I need you to step outside for just a moment," she said carefully. Reluctantly, I obeyed, my knees nearly buckling as I followed her into the hall. She turned her back toward the room, her face grim. Then, with a quick motion, she pulled out her phone and dialed. "This is Dr. Whitmore in ER 1, she said, her voice catching. "We need immediate assistance. I'm requesting law enforcement. Possible child endangerment, possible poisoning." "Yes, right now." Her eyes glistened as she ended the call. And in that moment, I understood the magnitude of what was happening. My daughter's weekend with her father had not just been disappointing. It had been dangerous. My stomach twisted violently, as if I might vomit right there in the hallway. Inside the room, Maya whimpered again, her cries faint, but slicing through me like knives. Every instinct screamed at me to protect her, but for the first time I realized protection might mean going to war. Not just with Derek, but with forces bigger and darker than I'd ever imagined. I pressed my hand to the cold wall for support, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling my lungs, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. A mother's nightmare had become reality, and the doctor's trembling 911 call was just the beginning of a truth too chilling for me to face alone. I never thought my life would unravel into a nightmare that looked so much like the stories you read in newspapers, and pray never happened to you. Just 2 weeks earlier, I was standing in a courtroom as my ex-husband Derek Morgan smiled smugly when the judge granted him weekend visitation rights with Maya. I had begged the court to reconsider telling them about Derek's violent temper, about the night he shoved me against a wall so hard. My ribs ached for weeks about the way he screamed inches from Maya's face when she cried too loudly. But Derek had perfected his mask of charm, painting himself as a hardworking father who only wanted to bond with his daughter. The judge looked at me like I was exaggerating another bitter ex-wife trying to cut a father from his child's life. The ruling was swift. He got his weekends. I was left with the gnawing fear that something terrible would happen. Derek thrived on control. He had once told me, "You're nothing without me, Rachel. Don't forget it." Those words stayed etched in my mind, reminders of the years of gaslighting that had hollowed me out until I barely recognized myself. But after I finally left him, I swore I'd never let him control me again. That promise became harder to keep when Maya's innocent smile lit up at the thought of seeing her father. She didn't know the man behind the mask the way I did. She still loved him with the kind of blind devotion only children can have. When he pulled into the driveway that Friday afternoon, his car rumbling louder than necessary, I felt my stomach knot. He stepped out wearing his leather jacket, that arrogant grin plastered on his face. "Ready for a fun weekend?" He called out, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. Maya squealed and ran toward him, her little purple suitcase bouncing in her hand. I crouched down and held her close, whispering, "Remember your allergy medicine before bed. Okay? And don't forget Mr. Whiskers." She nodded, clutching her stuffed cat tightly before handing it reluctantly to Derek. He rolled his eyes. "She doesn't need that thing. She's too old for it. She needs comfort." I snapped back, but he only smirked. "Always so dramatic, Rachel. I've got this. Try not to lose your mind while we're gone." He turned, ushering Maya into the car. I forced a smile for her sake, waving as she pressed her small hands against the window, her pigtails bouncing with excitement. But when the car disappeared around the corner, a chill spread through me, one that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. That evening passed slowly. I checked my phone every 10 minutes, waiting for Maya's usual goodnight call. By 8:30, when the silence remained, I called Derek's number. No answer. I tried again at 9, then at 10. Finally, a message came through at dawn, poor reception at campsite. "Maya's fine." The words were like ice water poured over me. No warmth, no details, just a message meant to pacify. My neighbor, Mrs. Langston, found me pacing the porch later that morning. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, with the wisdom of someone who had raised 5 kids of her own. Still no word she asked, lowering herself onto the porch swing beside me. I shook my head. "He says they're camping, but something doesn't feel right." She gave me a long look. "A mother's gut is rarely wrong. Don't dismiss it." I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that my trauma from Derek was coloring my perception. But the pit in my stomach only grew heavier with each passing hour. When Derek finally pulled into the driveway Sunday afternoon, half an hour late, Maya shuffled out of the car, her steps slow, her eyes dull. She didn't run into my arms the way she usually did. She leaned against me, her body limp. "Did you have fun camping, sweetie?" I asked, forcing a bright smile. "I'm just tired, Mommy," she whispered, flinching slightly as I hugged her. Derek handed me her suitcase with a shrug. "Kids crash after big weekends. She's fine." He didn't even step inside. He just gave me a look that carried a silent threat, then drove off. That night I opened Maya's suitcase to find all her clothes folded neatly untouched. Her shoes were spotless, not a speck of mud or pine needles anywhere. The lie was obvious. She hadn't been camping. She had been somewhere else. And by midnight, when she woke screaming, clutching her stomach, her forehead blazing with fever, I knew my worst fears were coming true. The hours after Maya's fever spiked felt like a blur, but the sharp edges of fear remained etched in my memory. She tossed in bed, her face slick with sweat, her little body racked with tremors each time the pain stabbed her stomach. I pressed a cool cloth to her forehead and whispered that she was safe, but my words sounded hollow even to me. Safe was a lie, and deep down I knew it. I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the untouched clothes in her suitcase, at the way her shoes gleamed as if they had never touched a trail. The image clashed violently with Derek's casual story about a weekend camping trip. My mind replayed the look on his face when he handed her over that arrogant shrug as if daring me to challenge him. I thought about the judge's disinterested gaze in the courtroom, the way Derek had painted me as bitter and unstable. Was this the price of not being believed? Maya whimpered again, clutching her stuffed cat tightly. I leaned down to brush her damp hair off her face, my heart breaking at her whispered words. "It hurts, Mommy. Don't let them make me drink again." My whole body went rigid. She was half asleep, maybe dreaming, but the phrase cut into me like glass. Drink again. What had Derek given her? My first instinct was to call him demand answers, but I knew how that conversation would go. He'd laugh, tell me I was hysterical, accuse me of poisoning Maya against him. That was his favorite tactic, gaslighting, until I doubted my own reality. I couldn't risk giving him the chance to twist this too. My hands shook as I fumbled for the thermometer again. 103.2. Too high, too dangerous. I grabbed my keys, scooped her into my arms, and whispered, "Hold on, baby, we're going to get help." By the time I pulled into the ER parking lot, my nerves were shredded. The fluorescent lights of the hospital illuminated every doubt and every memory of Derek's cruelty. The night he threw a glass against the wall, shards flying inches from Maya's crib. The time he locked me out of the house in the pouring rain for talking back. He had convinced so many people that I was unstable, but Maya's limp body in my arms was proof he was the real danger. Inside, the nurses rushed us past the waiting crowd. Dr. Whitmore's examination was thorough, her questions direct, and the flicker of concern in her eyes confirmed my darkest suspicions. She asked how long Maya had been like this, and when I told her it began the night she came home from Derek's, the connection was too sharp to ignore. I wanted to scream to tear the truth out into the open right there, but the doctor's calm voice held me steady. "We'll run tests immediately," while the nurse distracted Maya with a soft voice and a blanket tucked around her. Dr. Whitmore motioned me into the hallway. "You said she was with her father this weekend." "Yes," I whispered, my throat raw. "He told me they went camping, but her suitcase is untouched. No mud, no dirt, nothing." The doctor nodded slowly, her pen poised above the chart. "Did she mention anything unusual?" My eyes burned. She just said they didn't go camping after all. That's it. But something happened. I can feel it. Dr. Whitmore's gaze softened with understanding. "Trust that instinct. We'll figure this out." As she stepped away to order the tests, I pressed my forehead against the cold wall. Every part of me screamed that Derek had done something, or at least exposed Maya to someone dangerous. I thought of his new friends, the mysterious late nights, the expensive gifts he flaunted despite claiming to be broke. I thought of the smirk he wore when he won visitation rights, like he was already planning his next move. And now here I was with a child who couldn't stop crying from pain and no clear answers. Suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof. Proof strong enough to tear away Derek's mask, to make the court and the world see what he truly was. Proof that would stop him before he destroyed Maya completely. That night in the ER hallway, staring at my trembling hands, I swore to myself I would find out the truth. Even if it meant digging into the darkest corners of Derek's new life. Even if it meant facing enemies I didn't yet understand. Because this wasn't just a father's bad decision. This was something deeper, something toxic. Something that had already begun to poison my little girl's world. And I would not let it continue. 48 hours earlier, I stood in the driveway clutching Maya's small purple suitcase, my heart hammering, as Derek pulled up. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood, golden lights stretching over the quiet street, as if mocking the storm brewing inside me. Maya bounced excitedly on the front step, her pigtails swinging as she clutched Mr. Whiskers to her chest. Derek climbed out of his car, his leather jacket catching the light, his smug grin firmly in place. "Ready for the weekend, princess?" he called to Maya. His voice syrupy sweet, so different from the venom he spat at me when no one was watching. I knelt to zip up the suitcase and whispered to Maya, "Don't forget your allergy medicine, okay? And keep Mr. Whiskers with you at night." She nodded solemnly, the kind of seriousness only a 7-year-old can muster. I looked up at Derek, holding out the bag of medication. She needs these before bed, Derek, and she's been having nightmares. Please don't forget. He snatched the bag, rolling his eyes. Relax, Rachel. I know how to take care of my daughter. You act like I've never been a father before. Because you weren't, I wanted to scream, but I bit my tongue knowing any outburst would only give him more ammunition in court. He leaned down to Maya and said loudly enough for me to hear, "Your mom worries too much, doesn't she? But don't worry, Daddy's got everything under control." He winked and Maya giggled, too young to catch the malice hidden beneath his charm. I hugged her tight, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo clinging to her warmth, as if I could imprint the feeling before letting her go. "Have fun, sweetheart. Call me before bed tonight, promise." "Promise," she said brightly, holding up Mr. Whiskers. "I'll bring you a special rock from the lake, Mommy." I forced a smile, though my chest tightened with unease. She climbed into the back seat, waving wildly as Derek closed the door. "We're going camping at Pinewood Lake," he said, glancing at his watch as if even this exchange was an inconvenience. "She'll learn some real skills. Fresh air, fishing, campfires. You should try living a little instead of worrying all the time." He slid into the driver's seat, and as the car pulled away, Maya pressed her hands against the window, her face bright with excitement. I waved until they disappeared around the corner, then hugged myself against the chill creeping over me. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it. That night, I sat on the porch swing, waiting for Maya's goodnight call. 8 o'clock passed, then 8:30, then 9. By 10, my calls to Derek went straight to voicemail. I left messages, my voice carefully calm but shaking inside. "Hey, it's me. Just wanted to say goodnight to Maya. Give me a call when you can." The silence pressed heavy against me. I walked the porch until my legs ached, my phone clutched tight in my hand. At dawn, a single text buzzed through, "Poor reception at campsite. Maya fine. No punctuation, no warmth, no reassurance. Just cold words meant to pacify." My neighbor, Mrs. Langston, found me pacing again later that morning. She lowered herself onto the swing beside me, her knees cracking, her weathered face full of concern. "Waiting for news?" she asked. I nodded, showing her the text. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Rachel, I raised 5 children. A mother's intuition is not something to ignore. If your stomach says something's wrong, trust it." I wanted to believe I was being paranoid that Derek's smug grin had just triggered old wounds. But the knot in my chest only grew tighter. That evening, the phone finally rang. Maya's voice, small and tired, drifted through. "Hi, Mommy." Relief flooded me, but I noticed her lack of enthusiasm. "Hi, Ladybug. Are you having fun camping? Did you catch any fish?" A pause. "I'm okay, sweetheart." "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Daddy says I need to go now." Before I could press her, Derek's voice came on the line. "She's just tired. Don't overthink. We'll see you tomorrow." The call ended abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers. Sunday afternoon, Derek's car pulled up 30 minutes late. My pulse raced as Maya slid out, not bouncing or smiling, but moving sluggishly toward me. Her arms felt heavier when I hugged her, her head resting limply on my shoulder. "Did you have fun, baby?" I asked gently. "I'm really tired, Mommy," she whispered. Derek handed me the suitcase without stepping inside. "She's just worn out. Kids play hard then crash. You know how it is." His eyes lingered on mine, daring me to challenge him. Then he turned and left without another word. That night, when Maya's cries jolted me awake, when I found her curled in agony with fever burning through her skin, I opened her suitcase and saw the truth. Every piece of clothing was still neatly folded, shoes untouched. No mud, no pine needles, no smell of campfire. The story of Pinewood Lake was a lie. She had been somewhere else entirely. And whatever had happened there was now tearing through her little body, leaving me trembling with dread as I realized Derek's mask had finally slipped, and Maya had paid the price. Back in the hospital room, Maya had finally drifted into a restless sleep, her small chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. The fever clung to her like a shadow, sweat dampening her hair, her little hands gripping Mr. Whiskers, as if he were the only anchor left in a storm. Nurse Miguel pulled a blanket over her and then carefully pried something from her palm. "Mrs. Carter," he whispered, handing me the crumpled paper. She wouldn't let this go. My fingers unfolded the page and I felt my breath hitch. It was a drawing scribbled in crayon. At first, it looked like the kind of messy doodle any child would make, but the longer I stared, the more my stomach twisted. Maya had drawn a large house, not a cabin in the woods or a tent by a lake, but a two-story house with too many windows. Inside the windows were shadowy figures, tall and menacing, clustered around a smaller figure in the corner, Maya. And next to them, drawn in black and red crayon, were cups. My knees weakened. I pressed a hand to the wall for balance, bile rising in my throat. "Oh my God," I whispered. Dr. Whitmore entered just then, catching the look on my face as I held out the drawing. Her expression shifted immediately, professionalism cracking under the weight of what she saw. She glanced at Maya sleeping fitfully, then back at me. "This confirms we're not dealing with just illness," she said quietly. "We'll have the toxicology panel expedited. In the meantime, I need to call in a child psychologist." Minutes later, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and an air of calm authority arrived. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the child advocacy specialist. She crouched near Maya's bed, her movements soft, her voice gentle as she introduced herself. "Hi, Maya. I'm Rebecca. I brought some special crayons and a new notebook. Would you like to draw with me?" Maya's eyelids fluttered open. She nodded weakly and accepted the crayons. I watched her press a blue crayon against the paper, her small hands trembling. Within minutes, she had sketched the same house, only this time she added detail: a mailbox shaped like a fish painted blue, a long driveway, a door with too many locks. Dr. Chen glanced at me, then at Dr. Whitmore. Her expression was grave. "She's remembering something real," she murmured. "This isn't imagination." My skin crawled. Derek had told me they were camping. Yet here was proof from Maya's own hands that she had been inside a house. Not just any house, but one specific enough to draw repeatedly. Maya kept sketching, adding stick figures with strange features: earrings, a tattoo on a wrist, glasses. "Who are these people, sweetheart?" Dr. Chen asked. Maya hesitated, then whispered, "Daddy's friends. They were loud. They said I was too noisy. They gave me a drink in a cup." My breath caught. She looked at me with glassy eyes. "It made my tummy hurt, Mommy." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear down walls until I found every last one of Derek's so-called friends and made them pay. But I kept my voice steady, stroking her hair. "You're safe now, baby. No one will hurt you again." At that moment, Detective Samuel Brooks arrived. Tall, weathered, his charcoal suit slightly wrinkled. He carried the presence of someone who had seen too much darkness, but still chose to fight against it. He introduced himself quietly, then studied Maya's drawings with careful attention. "This house," he said, pointing to the fish-shaped mailbox. "I think I know it. We've had tips before about a property like this, Victor Reynolds' place." My stomach twisted tighter. I had heard Derek mention a Victor once in passing, bragging about his new business connections. The name sent a shiver through me now. "Victor Reynolds," Detective Brooks continued, "has prior arrests for possession. Nothing that stuck. But if your daughter's drawings are right, he's more dangerous than we realized." I looked from the detective to the doctor, then to my daughter, who was now coloring in a corner of her drawing with heavy, frantic strokes. "You have to do something," I pleaded, my voice raw. "You have to stop them before they hurt her again." Brooks nodded, his eyes sharp. "We will, but we need more evidence. Something that ties Reynolds, your ex-husband, and this house together." As if on cue, Maya set down her crayon and whispered, "There was a painting in the hallway, a big boat, and the kitchen counters sparkled." Brooks pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly, then showed me a property listing photo. My heart lurched. In the background was exactly what Maya described: a maritime painting and quartz counters that shimmered under the light. Proof. Maya had been there. My vision blurred with tears. The evidence trail had begun with a fever, a suitcase of untouched clothes, and a child's desperate drawings. But now it was unraveling into something bigger, darker, and undeniable. My daughter had been dragged into a world of shadows, and Derek had been the one to deliver her there. As I held Maya's trembling hand, one vow thundered in my mind. I would expose every last one of them. And I wouldn't stop until the truth burned through every lie Derek had ever told. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of the hospital room, casting pale stripes across the floor where I sat too exhausted to stand, but too terrified to close my eyes. Maya stirred beside me, murmuring in her sleep, and I tightened my grip on her hand. That was when Dr. Rebecca Chen returned, carrying a small tote bag filled with colored pencils, soft toys, and what looked like picture cards. She smiled warmly at Maya. "Hi again, sweetheart. Would you like to play a game with me?" Maya blinked awake, wary at first, then nodded slightly. Dr. Chen spread out the picture cards on a tray table and asked Maya to point to things she remembered from her weekend. Maya tapped the card showing a large house, then one with a glass of water, and finally a woman with bright red hair. My stomach dropped because I recognized that detail immediately. Hannah. My Hannah. The woman who had been my closest friend through college. The one who held my hand when I cried about Derek's first outburst. The one who promised me she'd always be there for Maya. Rage bubbled beneath my grief, threatening to choke me. Dr. Chen caught the change in my expression, but didn't press. She gently asked, "Sweetheart, can you tell me what happened at that house?" Maya's eyes flicked nervously between us before she whispered, "They said I was noisy. Daddy said I had to drink the special juice. The lady with red hair gave it to me. It made me sleepy. I swallowed hard, every nerve ending burning. Derek had always been reckless, but to let someone drug his own child, to let my so-called best friend hand her something poisonous." My fingernails dug into my palms until I thought they might break skin. Detective Brooks entered, then his notebook in hand, his presence grounding me like a steel anchor. "We ran the address your daughter described," he said calmly. "It belongs to Victor Reynolds, known associate of your ex-husband. He has a record, though, nothing that's stuck. But this," he gestured toward Maya's drawings pinned to the corkboard by her bed, "this is more than coincidence." He sat beside me, lowering his voice so Maya couldn't hear. "Rachel, I need you to prepare yourself. These men, Victor and his circle, they're not just irresponsible partygoers. They run parties where drugs flow freely, and children should never be anywhere near them. If Derek took Maya there, if your friend was involved, this is bigger than a custody dispute. This is criminal endangerment." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My worst fears were no longer just suspicions, they were fact. Dr. Chen, still crouched by Maya's side, looked up. "With your permission, I'd like to spend more time with her over the next few days. Children can't always say what happened, but through play and drawings, she might reveal more details that help us." I nodded without hesitation. "Anything. Just protect her." Later, when Maya napped, I stepped into the hallway with Detective Brooks and Dr. Whitmore. Brooks flipped open his notebook. "I'll be filing for a search warrant for Reynolds' property. We already have probable cause thanks to Maya's toxicology results. Traces of benzodiazepine in her system, sedatives that should never be given to a child." Dr. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "It matches the symptoms. Abdominal pain, fever, disorientation. Whoever gave that to her knew exactly what it would do." My knees weakened, and I leaned against the wall. He let them hurt her. Derek let them all hurt her. My voice cracked with fury. Brooks's eyes softened with something like respect. "You're stronger than you think. Most people collapse under pressure like this, but you're still standing. That tells me you'll be the one to help us bring them down." His words kindled a fire inside me, one I thought Derek had snuffed out years ago with his fists, his insults, his manipulations. Not anymore. That night, I sat by Maya's bed holding her hand as she slept, whispering promises only she could hear. "I'll protect you, baby girl. I'll fight them all, no matter how high they stand, no matter how many lies they tell. Mommy's not afraid anymore." In the quiet of the hospital room, surrounded by allies who finally saw the truth, I realized something had shifted. I was no longer just a victim of Derek's violence, no longer the woman gaslit into silence. With Dr. Chen, Dr. Whitmore, and Detective Brooks by my side, I had allies. And with allies, I had power. It was only a matter of time before Derek's carefully constructed mask shattered, before Victor's empire crumbled, before Hannah's betrayal was dragged into the light. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone, and that made me dangerous. The following afternoon, the hospital room felt heavy with a silence that pressed down on me like a weight. Maya sat cross-legged on the bed, her sketchpad balanced on her knees, crayons scattered across the blanket. Dr. Chen sat nearby, encouraging her with gentle prompts while I hovered by the window, too restless to sit. My daughter's hand moved quickly, faster than I had ever seen, as if she needed to get something out before it consumed her. When she turned the page toward us, my heart cracked wide open. The drawing showed the house again, the blue fish-shaped mailbox unmistakable. But this time, she added more detail. A woman stood next to her, drawn in vivid orange-red crayon hair, holding a cup. Maya's childish scrawl labeled her Lady Hannah. My blood froze. Hannah Lewis. My Hannah. My college roommate, my bridesmaid, the woman who once told me Derek wasn't good enough for me. She had been my anchor during those first turbulent months after leaving Derek babysitting Maya, when I worked late bringing over wine and telling me I wasn't crazy for wanting out. I felt my knees weaken, rage and disbelief twisting inside me like barbed wire. Maya's sweetheart, Dr. Chen, asked softly, "Is this the same lady who gave you the drink?" Maya nodded, her small fingers tightening around her crayon. She smiled and said, "It was medicine." She said it would make me sleep. My stomach lurched violently. Medicine. Hannah had once helped me pick up allergy prescriptions for Maya. She knew exactly what my daughter could and could not take. The betrayal sliced deeper than anything Derek had ever done because this came from someone I had chosen to trust. I staggered back against the wall, bile rising in my throat. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "Not Hannah." "She wouldn't! She couldn't!" But the evidence was there in Maya's trembling voice, in the way she pressed her crayon so hard, it broke. Detective Brooks arrived moments later, summoned by Dr. Chen. He studied the drawing, his jaw tightening. "Rachel, does this woman exist? Do you know her?" My voice cracked. "Yes, she's my best friend. She's been around Maya since she was a baby." I trusted her. I could barely get the words out. Brooks's gaze was steady, filled with a hard compassion. "Then she's more involved than you realized." My mind reeled, flashing through every moment with Hannah. The time she sat at my kitchen table, swearing she had my back. The time she took Maya to the park. Had it all been a lie? Had she been working with Derek behind my back, feeding him information, playing both sides? That night after Maya had fallen asleep again, I stepped outside the hospital to breathe, only to find Hannah herself waiting by the entrance. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her eyes bloodshot, her hands trembling. "Rachel, please," she begged, stepping toward me. "I need to explain." Fury surged hot through my veins. "Explain you gave my daughter drugs. You smiled at her while you poisoned her." She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't know what Victor was planning. Derek said it was harmless, that it would just calm her down. He told me you'd exaggerate no matter what, and I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. You had one job, Hannah, protect her. You were supposed to be her godmother, and instead you sided with him, with them." She reached for me, desperation etched across her face. I was scared. Victor has people. If I refused, I would have lost everything. "I didn't think—" "No," I spat. "You didn't think about Maya. You thought about yourself." At that moment, Brooks stepped out of the hospital doors, his sharp gaze falling on Hannah. "Ms. Lewis?" He said, his voice steady but laced with authority. "We'll need you to come down to the station for questioning." Hannah froze, then looked at me with a pleading expression that made my stomach churn. "Rachel, please. You know me. You know I'm not like this." I stared at her, shaking with rage. "I thought I did. But I don't know who you are anymore." Brooks placed a firm hand on Hannah's shoulder, steering her toward the waiting patrol car. Her sobs echoed into the night, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not grief. Only a cold clarity that settled into my bones. Derek had dragged Maya into a nightmare. Victor had orchestrated it, but Hannah's betrayal had driven the knife deepest because she had worn the mask of friendship while helping them hurt my child. As I walked back into the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I realized the battlefield had changed. this was no longer just a custody fight. This was a war for Maya's safety, and the lines had been drawn. Derek, Victor, Hannah, they had chosen their side, and I was ready to destroy them all. The courtroom smelled of old wood polish and stale coffee, a place where truth and lies collided under the weight of law. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my palms pressed flat against the surface, my body trembling but upright. Across from me sat Derek, his once polished appearance fraying at the edges. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, hunched, yet his eyes still glittered with arrogance. Behind him, Hannah sat pale and broken, her red hair tied back, avoiding my gaze. And further down, shackled and stone-faced, was Victor Reynolds, the man whose house had become a nightmare painted in my daughter's trembling crayon strokes. The judge entered, and all rose. I felt my heart beat against my ribs like a war drum. This was it, the place where every lie would be dissected, every mask torn off. The prosecution opened with photographs Maya's drawings laid out on the big screen, the fish-shaped mailbox, the maritime painting, the sparkly counters. Gasps rippled through the gallery as the images flipped one after another, undeniable proof drawn by a 7-year-old. Derek's attorney shot up, his voice slick with disdain. These are just children's doodles, unreliable. Nothing more than a bitter mother's attempt to manipulate the court. He turned his eyes on me like I was prey. Isn't it true, Mrs. Carter, that you've long sought to discredit my client because you resent him? Isn't it true you once told a neighbor, you'd rather see him in prison than let him raise your daughter? I swallowed the bile that rose in my throat and forced my voice steady. I told my neighbor I was afraid he would hurt her. And I was right. The attorney smirked. So it's all about fear. Isn't it possible, Mrs. Carter, that your trauma colors your perception, that you see danger where there is none? The old Rachel, the Rachel Derek, had gaslit into silence, would have folded, then would have second-guessed her own truth. But not anymore. I sat taller, my voice ringing through the hushed courtroom. Trauma doesn't create lies. Trauma creates scars. And I will not let my scars silence me anymore. A murmur rose among the spectators, and for the first time, Derek shifted uncomfortably. The prosecution brought forward Dr. Whitmore, who confirmed the toxicology report benzodiazepines in Maya's system. Then Dr. Chen, who described how Maya's drawings and words were consistent with a child describing real trauma. Finally, Detective Brooks took the stand, laying out evidence from Victor's house bottles of the same sedative, photos of parties, messages between Derek and Victor. Bring her one message read, "Prove your loyalty." The gallery gasped. My chest clenched. Derek's mask cracked. Sweat beaded his forehead. "It was just a party," he blurted, suddenly his voice rising. "She was fine. Rachel's making this into something it's not." The judge banged her gavel. "Order." But Derek kept going, his voice frantic now. "She exaggerates everything. She always has. She poisoned Maya against me. You poisoned her yourself," I shouted before I could stop myself, my voice shaking the walls. "You let them drug your own daughter to impress your friends? What kind of father does that?" The courtroom went silent. Derek's face twisted, a flash of the rage I knew too well. "You ruined me," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You'll pay for this." The words hung in the air like a blade. His attorney tried to recover, painting me as an emotional wreck clinging to the drawings of a child. But the damage was done. Hannah broke next. On the stand, her voice quivered as she admitted, "I gave Maya the cup. Victor told me it was harmless. Derek said Rachel would twist it anyway. I thought it would make the crying stop." Her tears dripped onto the table, but I felt no sympathy. The courtroom saw her for what she was, a coward who had betrayed a child for fear of her own discomfort. The prosecution's closing argument was a hammer. Derek had delivered his daughter into danger. Victor had orchestrated it, and Hannah had carried it out. Together, they had shattered a little girl's sense of safety. When the judge spoke, her voice was steel. "This court finds Derek Morgan guilty of child endangerment, conspiracy, and neglect. Victor Reynolds guilty of multiple felony charges, including drug distribution and child endangerment. Hannah Lewis guilty of aiding and abetting. Derek slumped in his chair, his smirk gone, replaced by the pale mask of a man finally stripped of control. Victor's jaw clenched, his eyes dead and unrepentant. Hannah sobbed openly, her betrayal laid bare for all to see. I closed my eyes, a single tear escaping not from grief, but from release. For years, Derek had silenced me, gaslit me, broken me down until I questioned my own reality. But in that courtroom, with the world watching, I spoke my truth. And this time, the truth had won. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. I sat in the front row of the courthouse, Maya's small hand tucked into mine, her stuffed cat perched on her lap like a silent guardian. The gallery buzzed with reporters, parents, strangers who had followed the story. I could feel their eyes on me, on us, but I didn't care. All that mattered was the child sitting beside me, her cheeks no longer feverish, her eyes brighter with each passing day. The judge's voice rang clear as she read the sentences. Derek Morgan for child endangerment, conspiracy, and neglect. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in state prison. I heard Derek's sharp intake of breath, saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the defense table. He twisted in his chair, eyes boring into me, but the power in them was gone. He was a caged animal now, snarling but trapped. The judge continued. Victor Reynolds for felony drug distribution, possession, and multiple counts of child endangerment. You are sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. Victor didn't flinch. He sat stone still, as though the world couldn't touch him. But his empire had crumbled, and I knew his silence wasn't strength. It was the brittle pride of a man who had finally lost. And then Hannah. Hannah Lewis for aiding and abetting child endangerment. You are sentenced to 8 years in prison, reduced for cooperation with the investigation. Her sobs echoed against the wood-paneled walls. She turned in her seat, her eyes searching for me, desperate for forgiveness. But I offered her none. She had already taken the one thing I could never replace: my trust. When the gavel struck, finality rippled through me. The weight I had carried for years, the fear, the gaslighting, the endless questioning of my own instincts, lifted like smoke dissolving in the air. Outside, reporters crowded the steps, microphones thrust forward, questions flying. Rachel, how does it feel to see justice served? Do you have a message for other parents? What's next for you and your daughter? I paused, Maya's hand tight in mine. She looked up at me with wide eyes, waiting. I cleared my throat, my voice strong, steady. My message is simple. Trust your instincts. Don't let fear or shame silence you. And remember, family isn't defined by blood, but by love, by safety, by respect. Cameras flashed, microphones buzzed. But all I saw was Maya's faint smile, the corners of her mouth lifting as she squeezed my hand. Weeks passed. The media storm quieted, replaced by the steady rhythm of healing. Maya began therapy with Dr. Chen, where she learned to put her feelings into drawings that no longer dripped with shadows. Her sketches grew brighter, sunflowers, blue skies, her stuffed cat sitting in the middle of fields of yellow. I planted real sunflowers in the yard with her, our hands digging into the earth, the soil cool against our fingers. Flowers always turn toward the light, I told her, pressing a seed into the dirt. She giggled, brushing soil onto her cheek. Then we'll be flowers too, Mommy. We'll always look for the light. Those words became our anthem. Each morning we checked the garden together, marveling at the small green shoots pushing stubbornly toward the sun. It was slow, but it was life. Healing was the same. Some nights she still woke crying, reaching for me in the dark. But now when I wrapped my arms around her, I could feel the strength in her small body, the resilience blooming despite everything. She began sleeping with fewer nightmares, her laughter returning in bursts like rays of sunshine through clouds. I found healing too, in ways I hadn't expected. I started a support group with Mrs. Langston's encouragement, opening my home once a week to mothers who carried bruises invisible to the world. We sat around my living room, cups of tea in hand, sharing stories that had lived too long in silence. Together we rebuilt courage, one confession at a time. Some of them whispered thanks, saying my case gave them hope, hope that courts could listen, hope that abusers could be held accountable. I never wanted to be anyone's symbol. But if my pain meant another child was protected, another woman saved, then maybe it had purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the garden glowed gold, Maya ran to me holding a single sunflower that had finally bloomed. Its yellow petals spread wide, radiant, defiant against the shadows. She held it high, grinning. "Look, Mommy! We did it!" I knelt, pulling her into my arms, the flower brushing against my cheek. Tears filled my eyes, not from grief, but from gratitude. We had survived. We had grown. And no matter how deep the darkness had once been, we had found our way back to the light. In the quiet that followed, I knew this was more than resolution. It was the beginning of something new, a life no longer chained by Derek's control, no longer haunted by betrayal. It was the life Maya deserved, and it was the life I had finally claimed for us both. Spring arrived quietly, soft breezes, carrying the scent of new blossoms through our small yard. The sunflowers we had planted months earlier stretched high above Maya's head, now their golden faces turning instinctively toward the light. She laughed as she ran between them, her arms wide, her hair glowing in the late afternoon sun. Watching her, I felt the sharp edges of fear and rage soften into something steadier resolve. We had survived the storm, but more than that, we had grown. Derek sat in a prison cell miles away, stripped of the power he once wielded, with a single glance or a cruel word. Victor's empire had been dismantled, his name synonymous with shame. Hannah's tears in court could not erase her betrayal, and the iron bars she now faced would remind her every day of the trust she had destroyed. Justice had been served not perfectly, not painlessly, but enough to prove to Maya and to me that the truth could stand taller than lies. Yet justice wasn't the end. Healing was. At night, Maya no longer cried out in terror. Instead, she whispered dreams about becoming an artist, about painting fields of flowers bigger than the sky. Her journals with Dr. Chen filled with color no longer only dark shadows and locked doors, but bright yellows, soft blues, and smiling faces. I too began to heal. I started writing not just reports for detectives or statements for court, but my own story in my own words. For years, Derek had defined my narrative, convincing me I was weak, broken, dependent. But now I wrote the truth. I was strong, I was capable, and I was free. Our garden became a sanctuary, each flower a testament to resilience. Neighbors stopped by with coffee, sometimes sitting on the porch to talk about their own struggles. Slowly, I realized we weren't alone. Our story had opened a door for others to share theirs. And in that sharing, a quiet community grew. One evening, as the sun set behind the rows of blooming sunflowers, Maya curled up beside me, her voice thoughtful. "Mommy, do you think bad people can ever become good?" I hesitated, then answered, "Some try, some don't. What matters is that we choose to stay good, to stay kind, no matter what they do." She nodded seriously, then smiled. "Then we'll always be flowers, right? Always turning to the light." Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled back. "Yes, baby, always." As darkness fell, fireflies lit up the yard, tiny sparks dancing among the tall stalks. I watched them and thought of every woman who had sat in my living room, every mother who had whispered fears that sounded too much like mine. I thought of every child who had been silenced, every victim who had been doubted. This story wasn't just mine. It belonged to them, too. And if telling it meant one more child was protected, one more mother was believed, then it was worth every scar I carried. To those listening now, to every parent, every survivor, every person who has doubted their own strength, trust your instincts. Do not let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter, because it does. It can change everything. It saved my daughter's life, and maybe, just maybe, it can save yours too. Before we end, I want to thank you for listening to my story. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one. And if you believe in justice, resilience, and the power of truth, hit like and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Because sometimes the darkest nights bring out the brightest stars. And together, by sharing these stories, we remind the world no matter how deep the shadows, the light will always find a way through.